Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to walk through the solution to the Week 5 Zybook Participation Activity 5.4.7 to calculate a factorial. So when you look at the Zybook Participation Activity, you'll see that you're to calculate a factorial by writing a program that lets the user enter some value in and to output in factorial. And in factorial means n times 1 times n times 2, etc. The activity gives you a hint to initialize a variable total to n, where n is that input that you received from your user, and to use a loop variable I that counts from total n minus 1 down to 1. So you're going to use a loop variable that you're going to decrement by 1 until you get down to 1. And this will make a lot more sense when you see the solution. After you're done with your program, you should compare your output to various factorial examples. So if you were to enter 4 as your input number, your factorial would be 24. If the user entered 5 for n, or the input number, the calculated factorial would be 120, or if they entered 8, it would be 40,320. So the steps here are to ask the user to enter a number for the factorial, calculate the factorial, and print each step in the factorial calculation. Well, I don't think we'll do that part. I think we'll just print it at the end. So these will be your answers here. Let's talk about some foundational concepts that will help you to understand the solution to the participation activity. The first thing is, let's make sure you understand what is a factorial. So a factorial is the product of an integer and all of the integers below it. We use this symbol exclamation point to designate a factorial, and then we're going to multiply all the whole numbers down from our chosen number down to 1. So 5 factorial would be 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 3 factorial would be 3 times 2 times 1. And these would be our answers. So we're going to have to use a while loop in this exercise. You're asked to use a while loop, and a while loop is a repetition structure. So as you know, we often have to write code that performs some task a multiple number of times, as we need to in this factorial exercise. The while loop is a condition control loop. So you're going to do your while loop while some condition is true. There's two parts to the while loop: the condition that we're going to test for true or false, and the statements that will be executed as long as that condition is true. So the general format here is while some condition is true, execute some statements. This would be a flowchart depiction of a while loop. We test the condition immediately right at the start of the loop. So this is a pre-test loop. We're going to test before we do anything. If it's true, we execute the statements, and we keep looping over and over again until the statement becomes false. Now, we often use a counter or some variable like I to control the number of times we do this loop. So here's the while loop in pseudocode. So we're going to have while some expression. We're going to loop through these substatements until it's no longer true. So in order for a loop to stop executing, something has to happen inside the loop to make this condition false. If nothing happens inside the loop to make this condition false, we'll have an infinite loop. We'll just continue looping and looping and looping. Each time we go through the loop, we call that one execution of the body of the loop. So again, a while loop is a pretest loop. We're going to test the condition before we perform our iteration, and we'll never execute that condition if it's false. Let's move on to the solution. to develop the solution to this activity, I'm going to use Python Anywhere. And as I've discussed in previous videos, this is an online Python integrated development environment. So you can run your Python scripts in a console and see your program executing without having to install anything to your computer. So I'm going to create our factorial program. We'll call it factorial.py. The .py extension indicates to the Python interpreter that this is a Python program that we're running. So as requested in the instructions for the activity, we're going to have to get some input from the user. So we'll ask the user to give us the number that they want to create the factorial for. So we'll ask the user to enter a number. So as you can see, we're going to take the input that we get from the user and we're going to convert it to an integer because we need to do math on this number. So we don't want it in a string format from the keyboard. The next thing we're going to do is to give ourselves a counter to increment and control the loop. This is often called I. We're going to make this equal to the total so that we can start out with the same number as entered by the user for the factorial. So the factorial is 5 times 5 minus 1 times 5 minus 2, etc. Or 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So now that we've got that, we simply need a while loop. And since the activity tells us to decrement a counter to get the answer, we're going to say while I is greater than 1. When we get to 1, we want to stop looping. We're going to multiply the total. We're going to come up with the total equals the total times I minus 1. Then per the instructions, we're going to decrement this the I that's controlling our loop. And we'll do this repeatedly while I is greater than 1. Finally, at the end of the loop, we're going to print the factorial that we calculated. Okay, so here is our solution to the lab. We have our while loop. We're going to print our answer. We're going to get our input from the user. So let's save this. And let's run it. So here's our program telling us to enter a number. So we'll enter 5. And we're going to come up with the factorial of 120. That matches what the Zybooks activity tells us we should have. Let's run this again. And we'll enter an 8. That should match what the Zybooks activity tells us we should have. And it does. It's 40,320. So this is the solution to the activity. I wanted to post a video because the instructions for the activity are not as clear as they could be, and I wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable completing this part of the Zybook assignment. If you have any further questions, please contact me by email and we can set up a virtual appointment. Thank you.